Agreed, and I know that side of the argument very, very well. But part of my journey in my own learning in the past few years was I got to a stage maybe 2, 3 years ago where I was like, okay, I know my side very, very well. You know, stoicism, fitness, high protein diet, capitalism, all these things. What if I did things the exact opposite? Why does the
Trying
vegan
to play devil's advocate here.
yeah, exactly. Like Rich Roll is like one of the people I probably look up to the most that's alive right now. And he's a vegan, very, very kind of, socialist. He's an ultra runner and he doesn't really lift too much weights. Like, so I've started listening to people from the other side, because who might say I'm on fucking either side, really? I don't really know what the fuck I'm at. I'm just trying to be curious and learn.
Yeah, look, it's obviously that's probably that's the approach that we all should have. There shouldn't be one side or the other. There should be, okay, let me let me take some bits from this side, let me take some bits from this side, and then let me form my own opinion on where, or you don't even have to lie somewhere, like, because like you're saying stuff there where, like, with socialism and communism, where, like, the importance of community and helping your neighbor out, which is true, like that's very, very important. And like when you look to the West, you would say, like I even look at my time in Canada and stuff, and like you're living in fucking a big city, you don't know who your neighbor is, they don't care who you are, like, you lose a lot of that. Even being in the Middle East, you see how close they are here, and how community and family, and like there's no homeless people here, there's no drug addicts. Like,
Let me
I ask someone why that happens, they go, it's just your family wouldn't allow it. And if there is people who don't have a home, there's places for them that they can go, the facilities are there, they have the services. So it's just like, it's interesting seeing how different cultures, and they respond to these things differently, and it does make you change your own it just makes you open your mind up a little bit, not be so closed in, okay, this is the only way that we should do it.
Hi everyone, bonsoir from Paris. So welcome back. This is episode 6 of the Kevin Welsh podcast, and today is a little bit different. It's a little bit of a change from the first 5 episodes, and I'm interested to see the reception in this. So this episode is dedicated to all the questions that I've got about moving to Berlin and living in Berlin in general for the first 2 months of this year. I know many of you will have an awful lot of interest in Berlin, but also in moving to a certain place, a city, vagabonding, just taking time out from your career, from your job, in a gap year out of college, and just moving somewhere that interests you and living there. But this episode particularly, like I said, is focused on Berlin. So many questions I've got through question boxes, through Q&As, and through all the social medias over the past few months about Berlin. And this podcast was aimed at answering as many as possible of those. And I think me and Keen, we go back and over, we do a good job of this. So it's a little bit different, like I said, in that I do most of the talking in this one, and I'm not picking apart someone else to get more usable or practical information about self-development. It's more about my experience in Berlin in the last 2 months, and how to help you have a similar experience, whether you go to Berlin particularly, or whether you go anywhere. How can you have an interesting travel experience that's a little bit more long-term, a little bit more than just your city break or your holiday away? So what we go through in this episode particularly is art, history, fashion and music. On my travels, I'll always be focusing on these 4 points, and most of them, as we talk about in the podcast, overlap. Art overlaps with history, history overlaps with music, music overlaps with fashion, and they're all very, very intertwined. They're all interests that I didn't have much time to focus on back in Ireland because, like everyone listening to this, I was just too busy. I had other things, work, study, football to focus on, and I didn't give time to these things. So this is what my travel experience is about, giving time to these other interests, and so many of you would love to do the same. This is to show you how to do it, and that it's far more practical than you actually think. What we talk about is how I got interested in house music and techno music. Keen was the one that introduced me to it, and why I fell in love with it. What captured me about Berlin in 2019, why I was so interested in the place and wanted to travel to it, wanted to return to it, why the energy in Berlin is so unique. Everyone will tell you who's been there that it's quite unique. It's a very, very different place. There's a weird vibe or energy around the place. What's my interpretation of why that is? And a lot of that goes into recent history in the last 100 years in that city, and how it's affected the mindset or the vibe of the city today. Why artists have chosen to live in Paris and Berlin in the last 100 years. What can we learn from socialism, communism, fascism, and capitalism? Why do people love them? Why do people hate them? How they affect people's mindsets? And can I even give a clear definition? After all my reading, all my studying, all my traveling, can I actually even give anyone a clear definition of what those things mean? Because we hear them all the time, and in my humble opinion, nobody knows what they're really talking about when they use those terms. And even if you study them, you still won't have a clear definition. We talk about why Ireland is a great place to live and how come it doesn't have many of the problems of big countries on the same scale. We talk about World War II, the Battle of Berlin, and a lot of the history tours I went on while I was in the city. We talk about the famous landmarks, Checkpoint Charlie, the Reichstag, Brandenburg Gate, Tempelhofer Feld, all the places that I visited in my 2 months there, and I got a lot done. We talk about how to get in to some of the most exclusive nightclubs in the world. It's extremely difficult to get in to the clubs in Berlin. They're infamous for that reason. You can queue up for hours and just get turned away without giving any reason. So I talk about how to get in and what's really they're looking for at the door, because I know a lot of people have messaged me that exact question. How did you get in? Was it difficult? What do you have to do? We talk about food places and coffee places in Berlin. We talk about the gym scene over there, and all in all, we just cover everything that you'll ever need to know if you're going on a trip to Berlin. So if you've been wondering about, geez, I'd love to go to Berlin, I'd love to visit that city, I'm not sure what to do, this is the episode for you. Goes through it all in a lot of detail. So without further ado, thanks very much for watching as usual. And if you are enjoying these podcasts, if you'd like to support them in any way, the simplest possible way is subscribe on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube. That is the easiest way to support the podcast. Leave a thumbs up there. If you want to support the podcast even further, think about becoming one of my online coaching clients. My clients since the start of the year have been killing their programs. Their progress is incredible. I'm looking forward to sharing it all with you in the next month or two. I have some very special results. So if you are thinking about becoming a client, remember that's the main way to support the podcast. Become a client online or become a client in the gym at 100%. As usual, thanks for watching. 3, 2, 1, live. And welcome back to the Kevin Welsh 100% podcast. We're here in episode number 6, and we have back on the very special Keen Brennan, who's live from Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. How's everything in Jeddah, Keen?
How's it going, everybody? How's it going, Kev? Yeah, everything's good here in Jeddah, as they say it here. That's how they say it. It's not Jeddah, it's Jeddah.
Yeah. Do you notice how we pronounce things the Irish way, no matter what country we're in? And it doesn't. I know with the French, it doesn't really get them going at all when we pronounce things. When I pronounce things the Irish way.
Yeah, well, to be honest, man, I go out of my way to like making a conscious effort to like. So when I'm saying it over here to people, like now I'm saying like Jeddah, and I'm saying like the other capital is like Riyadh, but I say Riyadh because that's how they say it here. So I'm just like, you don't sound like a rookie when you do it. They're like, oh, like people have said it to me. They're like, your pronounce like locals, like your pronunciation is fucking really good. Just
Yeah.
gets them going that little.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think my accent or your accent is particularly strong on the grand scheme of things compared to a lot of Irish accents, which like up the
Oh
north,
man,
down the south, the dubs, and I make an effort as well, but it's still the Germans and the French way more so. They don't like when you pronounce things your way.
well, I heard on the podcast you did with Luke, you were speaking about this, and I can relate to it so much, man. I've like completely since I moved to Canada, I had to like from the very start, I learned, and I'm doing it a bit now. I learned to just like slow down and like enunciate and pronounce stuff better, like slower. And people say to me here, like they're like, oh, your accent isn't too bad, and I'm like, yeah, I'm like, but I lived in Canada for almost 3 years. I learned how to like slow it down and like really speak clearer in a more neutral kind of a accent, because I was like, if you listen to me and my friends just speaking in our own lingo, our speed, like you wouldn't know what the fuck we're saying.
Not
Because
a
it's like
clue.
it's funny. There's a new trainer from Dublin after coming out here, and
Mm.
he's like has a heavy enough Dublin accent. And when me and him start talking, like we're just having the banter and we're just having the crack and we're saying our Irish shit just as normal. Some of the other trainers are kind of just like looking like they don't know what we're saying.
Yeah.
They don't know what's going on.
But
Gas.
even back home in my house, when me and Brendan used to chat, Mom used to say that it's like you're speaking a different language. I know what you're saying. And that was just two
Well, just
brothers in the house.
yeah, it's mental. It's mental. But yeah, I'd imagine from what I heard, I've never actually been in France, but I heard that they don't. If you can't speak French or you're not like you don't sound like you're putting on a French accent, it doesn't really get them going.
No, no, which is understandable. You're in their country, but in Berlin, they're only happy to speak English and they speak very, very good English. In France, it's like they look at you if you start talking English or if you ask, oh, do you speak English? It's nearly like, well, why don't you speak French?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is understandable.
Mm.
If like someone came to Ireland and they don't speak English, I wouldn't know what to say to them.
Gee, which
Like, all right, so we'll start jumping into the main topic. We could talk about so many things, and we wouldn't be able to shut up.
Oh, I was
Especially,
going to ask you how you're getting on in Paris, but like, I guess well, how are you getting on? Briefly.
well, we won't do Paris this one because if we start into Paris, we'll never get through Berlin. With so much Berlin to get through. Okay, so before I start anything on Berlin, give me one question as a starting point.
that I ha- that I have for you.
Yeah, what's the first thing that comes to your mind about Berlin? Like my last couple of months in Berlin, we say.
Okay, a good question for you about your time in Berlin.
No, not even a
Um,
good question. Just what's the first that comes into your head?
do you miss Berlin?
Yes, yes, I do. I think it has a special place in my heart as like I just had so much fun there, and Berlin like symbolizes freedom for not just for an awful lot of the world, and I kind of get that as well. I kind of think like, oh wow, this is such a free place. Like you can do anything, you can be anyone, you can. It just symbolizes freedom for like artists, musicians, for the Germans themselves, and the Berlin Wall and all the history, and I definitely miss it. But I'm not like crying over it. I'm in Paris. I've fucking nothing to complain about here. Paris is very different, and I love it for different reasons. But I do miss Berlin, yeah.
On the freedom thing, did you know that about Berlin, about freedom before you went there, or is it something that you had to actually go there to realize?
I did. I did, but only because of the first time when I was there in 2019. I didn't realize it before that. Okay.
Okay.
So you like a good what I wanted to cover here was why I love Berlin and what made me fall in love with it, say, right? Because it happens a lot of people. It's a thing. People go to Berlin and they fall in love with the place and they start letting it kind of infiltrate their whole personality. They start dressing that way, they start acting that way, they start talking that way. I'm not as susceptible to that, as in like just because I go somewhere and I love it, I don't let it take over my whole personality, you know? And I
Yep.
definitely wouldn't consider myself like a Berlin hipster or whatever. But a lot of people go there for a week and they turn completely that way, which is pretty unusual. Not many places have that effect on people. I've heard maybe New York, LA, some other places have that effect on people, but not too many other places. But first of all, so why is the vibe there so unique and what's so unique about it? So basically, the recent history is what has it driven to be so unique. So what happened was when I went in 2019, I was used to going on city breaks, and you see these beautiful cities in Europe, especially, and they're really aesthetic and they're really like they're almost glamorous. They're so aesthetic. And then you go to
Yep.
Berlin, and it has this massive draw and this huge population and this huge interest from people who are from Berlin, but also obviously people who are not from Berlin. But it's not aesthetic at all. You know, you have like the Brandenburg Gate, and you have the Reichstag, and you have, you know, some historical buildings. But Berlin is not a good looking city. Like it's a shithole compared to Rome or
Homer.
Paris. You know, like
Yeah,
there's
or many of the other beautiful ones like Vienna or like
Mhm.
where you know wherever
E-
all the European places,
even a lot
Budapest.
of Amsterdam, even a lot of Amsterdam, like.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I was there and I was like, this is kind of the opposite of a lot of city breaks. You go there because the place looks nice, and you know it could be winter, it could be even Krakow. The main squares in Krakow are so much more beautiful than Berlin. So I was like, why do people love coming here if it's not that nice to look at? That might sound silly, but like that's what I was thinking, you know. And
Yeah.
but even before that, so that was the first time I went. Even before that, I got interested in Berlin because I got interested in techno, in the music.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
you'll find this funny because you were there for all of this as well. So I started listening to house music first, well, EDM first, Hardwell and Avicii and the Boys, and then
Like we all did.
yeah, you introduced me to house music. So I remember, do you remember we used to always play Bontan Move On Out in the gym in the morning?
Yeah. Move on now. Yeah. What a thing.
What a brilliant tune. So that was kind of my intro into non-mainstream electronic music.
But do you remember though? There was a massive at that time as well though. Like in within the mainstream, there was a big push on like Duke Dumont became like big. Like that house vibe started to come in. Like
Hmm.
who else? There was a good few of those artists like
Deep House.
Gorgon City,
Do you remember Deep House?
Deep House. Yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah, that was like
Chris
that was like the
Malinchak as well. Do you remember Chris Malinchak?
yes, so good to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I started getting more interested in that type of music. And you were the person that introduced me to it. And when you introduced me to it first, I was like, how does anyone listen to that shite? You know, like a lot of it
You
sounded,
remember the first gig? The first gig
yeah,
that we went to.
in what was it? Uh oh, MK in fucking Carbon.
MK in Carbon in Galway.
It was like nothing I'd ever been to before.
Yeah.
And
Same actually. Yeah.
the music was just so much better. I think your first ever Instagram photo was it was a picture of MK, wasn't it?
with with him. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but then, anyways, as we started going to more gigs than that, I started getting interested in, you know, more house music, tech house, techno, and my favorite type of music to this day is 80s music. I absolutely
Mhm.
love 80s music. I never listen to techno when I'm here at the house. I never listen to techno on the way to the gym. The only time I ever listen to techno is in the gym, and even then I it's 50-50 with kind of like Joe Linkin Park, Limp Bizkit metal music and rap music.
Yep.
But live techno is like the best by a mile. So we started going to more gigs, and remember we went to Krystal Klear, the Irish DJ.
Yeah.
So Krystal Klear was my absolute favorite because he was playing 80s tunes in the middle of techno sets.
Yeah.
Remember,
And he's
he'd
very
be
disco as well.
Yeah, he'd be playing Tears for Fears, everybody wants to rule the world, and Ain't No Mountain High Enough. And when I saw on his story, I started following him, saw him 3 or 4 times live. I'd say you were with me every time. And
Yeah.
when I saw him live and started following him, I saw he was playing in this club in Berlin called Berghain. So I was like, and then you look up Berghain and it's just fucking lunacy what you find on Google for Berghain. Like there's so many myths around the place that you'd swear it's fucking this absolute chaotic underworld place. But like Krystal Clear, anyone listening to the podcast, you can look him up. He's a regular looking dude, you know, very, very Irish, normal looking dude. So if he's playing there and his music is very listenable, even to people who aren't into techno music or electronic music, a lot of
It's
it
not that heavy. It's not that heavy.
not that heavy at all. So he's playing there. I'm like, geez, this is meant to be the best club in the world. Berlin has a lot of the best clubs in the world from what I was looking up. Geez, I'd love to go there. I'd love to see that, you know? So then a few months after that, or it could have been a year or two after that, maybe 2019, this thing pops up on my suggestions on the advertisements. It's like they read your mind, okay?
On Instagram.
On Instagram, yeah. And it was a recommendation for going to Height for New Year's Eve in Berlin. So I looked up.
I didn't realize that was a ad that came up on your Instagram. I
Hmm,
just thought you were like, oh, I'm gonna go to. So it was actually a suggestion.
I never would have went otherwise. I was going snowboarding in Krakow with Angela, and my parents were meeting us out in Krakow as well. And I was like, oh my God, look at the lineup for Height New Year's Eve. So I looked up
Yeah, yeah.
so I looked up Height, or sorry, I looked up New Year's Eve in Berlin, and everything on the internet was telling me biggest night in the whole year is Sylvester in New Year's for Berliners and for Germans in general. The lineup was Joseph Capriati, Maceo Plex, Marco Carola back to back with Loco Dice, Richie Houghton, Charlotte DeWitt. It was outrageous to line up, and I was like to Angela, I was like, I have to go to this. This looks unbelievable. And it was in this place called Funkhaus, which was an old East Berlin, I think, TV station. And if you look it up, Funkhaus Berlin, it's really cool. It's like your stereotypical Berlin nightclub. It's like a dungeon nearly, or like an underground kind of bunker.
Mhm.
So I went to that gig anyway, and I was just fascinated by the place because it was so different to everywhere else. The nightclubs have no opening times or closing times. Well, they obviously have opening times and closing times, but not in the stereotypical, you know, 12 till 6 or whatever. People go to the nightclub at any time of day or night, like they're going to a cafe or a restaurant. So I went to that gig at 7 o'clock in the morning. I went night sleep, got up, had a coffee, went to the gig. And that's what loads of other people were doing as well. And that's what loads of people do in Berlin every single weekend. So I went to see my DJs at that set. That's what people do. Rather than, oh, it's 12 o'clock at night, I'm going to head to the nightclub, they pick a time a DJ is going to play and head off to the nightclub there.
Yeah. Which is completely what we're not used to.
It sounds, a lot of what I say now about Berlin is going to sound
Sounds.
so counterintuitive or so lunacy. But if they were to come here from their environment and see what we do, they'd say, "What the fuck is the point in any of this? Why would you close your nightclubs at 3 o'clock and have everyone pouring out onto the street drunk at the one time? You know, why would
Yes.
you? Why would you only open them for maybe 3 4 hours? Is it not way more dangerous for fist fights and all that?" And they would be right. So it's just culturally what you're used to. But anyway, that's how I got interested in things. So when I went to that gig in 2019 for New Year's, I was like, oh my God, I have to come back here. This is the coolest thing I've ever experienced. The vibe, the energy, what people wear, the art, the history was just completely different to anything I had experienced.
Yeah, you kind of answered there. I was gonna say, what was it about that 2019 trip though that like that made Berlin like have your heart? Like, was there
Do you,
anything in particular?
I'll tell you exactly what it was. It was I didn't understand it. Okay. That's what got to me the most. I didn't understand why they loved music so heavy. But then when I experienced it, I was like, oh, it just works. So this music suits the architecture, suits the building, suits the vibe of the place. Do you know? Because when you're in Paris, people dress kind of Paris way. It's like they're influenced by the history and the architecture of the buildings. And Jordan Peterson talks about this a good bit as well. It's like people are very, very influenced by their architecture,
Mm-hmm.
to the shape of the buildings. So I just didn't understand why people would dress the way they do in Berlin. And it's not all like crazy dress sense or anything. It's just subtly different, you know. When you're
It's
in
just it's
Rome,
just it's quite distinct. It's quite distinct though.
it is. You've been there and you've lived it, you've experienced it. But like it's the way people dress in London, Rome, and Paris is different. And it's hard to put into words, but it is distinctly different in each place.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been to Paris, London, and Rome. Yeah, definitely, man. It just feels like I don't know. I don't want to say sinister or dark, but it just seems like the dress sense is like there's like a darker. It's like in Berlin, it's a bit darker. Now I don't know. Is that am I saying that just because it's a lot of it is like black. It's like it's a lot of black. People
Mm.
wear a lot of like black in Berlin. That's what I noticed.
There's something in fashion as well. Now, I'm no expert here. This is all amateur history, amateur opinion on
Yes.
fashion and music and everything. But there's a thing in fashion called where they talk about silhouettes. In Berlin, the silhouettes are a lot bigger. They're a lot chunkier. They're a lot like they like baggy clothes and like bigger silhouettes, as opposed to like the Italians or the French, where everything's kind of more fitted.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. That
Do you
makes
know
sense.
that? Do you know that Rick Owens fella that they're all talking about these days? A lot of the rappers wear his stuff. He's from LA.
Like I hear the rappers on about Rick Bones.
Yeah, he's big into these massive silhouettes, and his shoes, they call them like monster trucks for your feet. It's just like that kind of vibe, and I didn't get it at all, and I still don't. You know, again, I'll re-emphasize, I still don't consider myself any expert in Berlin or anything, but I definitely do get it a lot more now. So another good question now would be to ask is, why is Berlin like that? Why is it so just a unique vibe or energy about the place?
Well, I'm going to assume, and you can answer it, but it has something to do with the history. But
Yeah.
why?
Well, this is my opinion.
Yeah.
Went through the lunacy of, you know, World War I less than 100 years ago, or just about 100 years ago, sorry, and all that entailed, and all the carnage that brought on the societies involved in World War I, how many people died. And then they went from that extreme and all the starvation and everything that came after it, the interwar period, to the Nazis. And the Nazis were extreme fascists, about as extreme fascist as you can possibly get. And then they crashed out of that in World War II, more devastation, millions and millions of people dead, and they went into this communist. So, like fascist and communist, they might seem, a historian who I went on a tour with explained this to me, they might seem like opposite ends of the spectrum, fascism and communism, but he said they're actually far more alike than people think because they're both totalitarian.
Okay. Yeah.
So basically, communists are like, you know, to hell with anyone trying to make money or squeeze money out of the hard working people. We're going to throw them all in the gulag and whatever. And the Nazis are to hell with anyone outside of this superior German race. But how did you could, you know, you could have fucking 10 podcasts on that point alone. But how does this relate back to Berlin? Well, after World War II, Germany was split up into four parts by the victorious nations. So there was a French, US, English, and Soviet part. Then Berlin, the capital of Germany, was in the East German part. They split Berlin into four, and I didn't know this until
Just
recently.
right. Who was occupying the East part? Was it the Soviets?
The Soviets, yeah.
Okay.
But they split Berlin into four inside the east part. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
What I thought before this was, I knew Germany was split in four, but I didn't know that Berlin was actually inside East Germany. I thought it was maybe on the border or something between East Germany and the rest. So this is actually really important because this is why the Berlin Wall was built. Everyone from communism, the communist East part, socialist, the DDR was called, or the GDR, German Democratic Republic, or in German, Deutschland Democratic Republic, or whatever. So they were extreme communist. It was a puppet state by the Soviet Union, like Hungary, like Poland, like all these other countries. And they just bled the people they were under their power completely dry. Like they just worked them to the bone, and like very, very little rewards, long food queues and food shortages and all this type of stuff. After World War II, they had this area in East Germany, which was a borough that controlled by England America, and France. Now, France and England were so fucked after World War II that it was more or less just America. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
Their chunks, France and England's chunks of Germany, they didn't really do anything with them. They just kind of left them to their own devices. But America was more involved in hunting Nazis and building the place back up and the Marshall Plan and things like that. And
This
then
is this is that just because of the fear of communism? Like America, we're just like we are anti communist that we don't want the spread to continue.
exactly, exactly, which is in essence the Cold War.
Yes.
And that's why so we're completely shaped by World War II. I've talked to you about World War II quite a bit. Like everything we do right now, from you in Saudi Arabia back to what I'm doing in Europe, what you were in Canada, all these countries, the whole world is completely shaped by the outcome of World War II. You can trace everything back in Ireland, everything. But anyway, so everyone from communist East Germany or East Berlin was trying to flee into West Germany or West Berlin. So what they did was they built a wall, the communists, the Soviets built a wall around West Berlin, and you got shot dead if you tried to enter it. I think there was 300 people shot dead in the 40 years old. So insane. And this is in 1990. There was still people shot dead for trying to leave a communist country and go into a capitalist one. And they were listening to this unbelievable Soviet propaganda. Now, of course, the West, America, is very, very guilty of loads of propaganda as well, Joe. Still is.
Of course. Yep.
But
Yep.
communist propaganda is particularly insane. If you do any research and you look it up, I'd encourage everyone here to look up propaganda and Soviet propaganda. It's worth knowing, to understand how it works. So they have this crazy history between extreme fascism, extreme communism, very, very traumatized society because of the two world wars. And then the Soviets, Stalin famously said he's going to steal everything from Germany that isn't nailed down. He said that to Roosevelt and Winston Churchill. So he just stole everything and he didn't rebuild it. Up till 1991, there was parts of Berlin that were still bombed out from World War II that weren't even cleaned or weren't even renovated.
In the east, in the east in particular, or also the west,
In the
or
east
just
side,
the east?
West Germany was completely more or less rebuilt.
Oh yeah, okay, makes sense.
Because it was a free society. No, free is
Capitalism.
yeah, capitalism, very subjective. Well, see, there's actually a very popular and convincing argument. England recovered terribly after World War II because the Labour Party, the socialists, got into power right as World War II ended. And Q-topia is what Churchill called it because there was a queue for everything. There was food shortages, there was everything. But famously, Germany and the rural region in particular down the bottom was absolutely booming in the 2-3 decades after World War II because they didn't have to worry about any like socialist or it was complete free market. It was literally do whatever you want to make money. The place got far, far wealthier, far quicker.
Makes sense.
Controversial opinion, plenty of fact checker points on this episode, but this is my interpretation and I'm always willing to be debated and corrected on any of this. We'll just put that out there.
Yeah, it's the internet.
Yeah. So,
Free market.
so what the fuck does this have to do with techno music? So basically,
Tell us.
city,
I'm intrigued.
yeah, the city is just a hotbed of recent history. Okay. So East meets West in Berlin. That is it's just a fact. Like the East is Russia, it's the Middle East, it's Eastern Europe. That meets Western culture, America, England, France. It meets in Berlin. And it almost like the wall divided the two of them during the Cold War. Okay. Churchill again famously called it the Iron Curtain. You heard about the Iron Curtain?
Yeah, I've heard it. I didn't realize that that's what it was in relation to.
Yeah, that's what it was. The Iron Curtain. And like this, The Berlin Wall was the symbol of the Iron Curtain. So that brings us to the world nearly ended in Berlin. The Soviet tanks were facing off the American tanks. I think it was in the 60s. Again, I'm not sure the exact dates. And nuclear war was about to happen. And if nuclear war happened, the world was going to end. And the world was going to end. Where was nuclear war going to start? Most likely Berlin, because it wasn't going to happen on American soil and it wasn't going to happen on Russian soil. It was going to happen in the middle. Okay. Where
Intermediate, yeah.
where symbolically communism was meeting capitalism. So you had and then in East Germany in the GDR, you had this culture of spies and espionage and the people all being informants. So Jordan Peterson said this quite a bit, that one in every three citizens was an informant to the Stasi. And the Stasi was basically your KGB, your CIA, your Gestapo type, secret police.
Yep.
And I wanted to go to the Stasi museum, but it was closed. But they were like as horrible as you can possibly get. Like one of the history teachers taught me on the tours that no socialist or communist state can survive without a secret police. So like
So say so the Stasi was the East, so the Soviet police force that were put in Germany,
yeah,
basically.
yes, but listen to
Okay.
this. The Americans famously said when they went into Germany and they had their German part, so, oh, we're going to find every single Nazi, until they got the rude awakening that basically every how deep the tentacles of the Nazi party got into the German society. Everyone was a fucking Nazi.
Yep.
Knowingly or unknowingly, they had all participated in some way. And then France and England were just too weak after World War II to do anything. So they kind of just will find some Nazis and we'll just kind of just do what we can. But we have ourselves to look after. England and France was in serious trouble after World War II, as was most of Europe. Then what the Soviets did was put an awful lot of the Gestapo straight working in the Stasi afterwards. So there was
Okay.
huge amounts. Now, don't forget, I'm not, you know, letting America off the hook here. Remember Operation Paperclip? You've heard about that.
Yeah, yeah. Where the Americans took loads of the Nazis over to America.
Exactly, because they had just made so much progress in such a short
They had
amount of
great
time.
minds. Yeah.
Hmm? Great minds, exactly.
They had great minds.
Scientifically, politically, all these different things. So they took a lot of Nazis to America to help with the American, I don't know, progress, I suppose you could make American made when it was became the dominant world power in the 50 years, 60 years after World War II. So
Yeah.
but the Soviets also did something very, very like Operation Paperclip. They took a load of high-ranking Nazis and they took them to Russia to work on loads of different projects. So from weapons and war to politically to all aspects of science, basically. Just to help with the steal a lot of Nazis' ideas and implement them, like Operation Paperclip. During the Cold War, then in Berlin, you had the highest concentration, and apparently still to this day, you have the highest concentration of spies in the world. So you're talking about James Bond stuff, right? So
Yeah, that was crazy when you told me that. That blew my mind a bit, to be honest.
the German Espionage Museum, very famously, my dad told me about this a few years ago. He's like, it's very famous that there's more spies in Berlin than anywhere else in the world. So you can imagine like how weird that is. Like there's a kind of an end of the world strange vibe going on between all the spies. All now, I'm not saying I met any spies or met James Bond. I could have, but I definitely didn't know they were working. But there's MI6 agents.
You might have been off work in the club.
I
Let the hair down. Let the hair down.
no doubt, no doubt. But so what was I saying? So you have the MI6, the CIA, the KGB, Mossad, the Israelis, You had an
Yep.
awful lot. You had an awful lot of Palestinian and Islamic terrorists and spies, all getting trained and all working in fucking Berlin. So the place is just mental recent history, absolutely mental. So what has that affected the people? Of course, it has affected the people. Now, are 99% of the people as normal as you or me? Obviously, yes. But the vibe of the place is very, very it's just very different.
Very different. And how does this all tie in then with because Berlin obviously it's a massive it's like the techno or the club capital of Europe, definitely. Would you say is it of the world?
Some people call it club capital of the world, club capital of Europe. And to be honest, when I was trying to find out like why this place was so mad after going there in 2019, these are the reasons I'm given. This is what I'm coming up with. History and like what's happened in the past that's going to affect why is Ireland Ireland because of its history. Why is America, America, because of its history. Why is Berlin, Berlin? Because of its history. So when the Berlin Wall fell, you had this mass exit from East Germany and East Berlin. Everyone was get out there as fast as possible in case the socialists or the government or the communists were going to get them back again and get their shit together again. But they didn't because the communism completely fell after 91. So what happened was you had all these abandoned buildings and rent was a very cheap and you had loads and loads of abandoned apartments and abandoned buildings. So when rent is very cheap anywhere, it tends to attract artists, not in all places, but generally this happened in Paris in the early 20th century. Like Hemingway, Picasso, all them, they were all like I could name 50 more. They were all drawn to Paris because rent was very, very cheap and you could live very, very easy and you didn't have to work. Artists don't like working. Creatives don't really like
And
work.
they don't usually have much money as well.
Exactly. And interestingly, I was on a Paris tour the last day and it was in Montmartre. And I'm probably pronouncing that the Irish way, Montmartre. They were saying that to this day, there's hundreds and hundreds of artists living in Paris in like six to a room, one mattress job, you know, and a lot of them,
Yeah.
and a lot of them are very intelligent. They're very smart. They're very creative. They're brilliant painters or musicians. Or when I say artists, I just don't mean just people drawing or painting. I mean artists of
Yeah,
all,
it's possible. Yeah.
and they're
Great
just happy
creatives.
to, and they're just happy to live in squalor because it's I'm doing my creative thing or whatever. So Paris had that in the early parts of the 20th century, which is it's very famous. People talk about Paris back then, when Hemingway and Picasso and all them were living there. But Berlin had it after the last 20, 30 years because of the fall of the Berlin Wall, and it was a cool place to live, and it was very, very cheap. And artists like sleeping in 3 o'clock in the day, drinking coffee, smoking fags, and partying, drinking wine. So you have that kind of culture in it. Now, that's not only what happens in Berlin, but that, it's famously Berlin, very, very famous for that.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, that makes sense.
hmm, so I think I'm painting a little bit of a picture here on why Berlin is Berlin.
Yeah. You are. It's just crazy though, because like you're after going through that history there, and then for me, I'm trying to think in my head, how does that tie in with the club scene there, particularly with the fall? I think at the end there, when you said about the fall of the wall and people trying to get out and go to the west, and also the fact that the rent and the prices were so low, I didn't actually realize that. So that makes sense as to why. Because if you think about it, like any of the clubs that I was in when I was there, what they were essentially just like abandoned fucking. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, of course they moved it. That's that. So I was trying to wonder, why did they just do that? Because it's aesthetically a cool thing, because it is pretty cool when you're in an abandoned thing like that. You're like, geez, this is pretty cool that like this is a club. But now that makes more sense, the fact that rent was very, very low, they moved in. uh yeah, it's
Oh,
that's interesting.
the majority of those nightclubs now, they weren't planned as in like, oh, this is a business and we're going to make a business out of this nightclub. You know, like a lot of Western cities, oh, we'll put 1 million or 500,000 into this building and make it a nightclub. They were literally just raves in an abandoned shed or abandoned house or abandoned power plant. Berghain famously is an abandoned power plant.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? That they didn't plan for that at all. But but they've actually ended up standing the test of time and being not only standing the test of time, but being like the most like revered, some of the most revered clubs in the world.
Yes. And East Berliners, because they were so controlled and so horribly treated in East Berlin by the DDR and spied on and everything. They had no freedom. And next thing they get are like massive amounts of freedom, literally anti-free. And what do? They go nuts. They just party all the time. So
They party all the time. They
even
don't wear
to,
clothes when they're
so even in Berlin now, a lot of West Germans they call East Aussies because Ost is East in German,
partying.
like Aussies because they look a bit different, they act a bit different, they talk a bit different, but they're after living in communism, you know.
Mm,
So
yeah,
they're used to handouts from for the government. You know, you can't like there was a car in East Germany everyone famously got a car if you asked for one, but there was a 9 year waiting list. You know, there was queues for bread and food. You had these long food queues. All this type of daft stuff just was the lunacy of the communist system. But then they still love communism, socialism, and Karl Marx in East Germany right now. They still love it. What they're don't ask me to explain this, but like basically to explain it as good as an expert, but basically they love it because they still believe in it. They still believe that socialism can work, or that communism can work, or that capitalism is completely corrupt and flawed and failing. Okay. And they have a point. They have a huge argument. There's a massive part of Western capitalism that has people fucked. You know, like every Western city you go to, there's a real degenerative aspect to it in terms of how many drug addicts there is, on how many alcoholics there is, people just using medications, all the modern Western problems, people eating foods that make them sick. Just like there's so much of the Western world as brilliant as it is, that's absolutely terrible. And you don't have those same problems in communist socialist states. You have other problems, okay, that are fixed by being strong economically, like what the West has. You have other problems, but you don't have those problems nearly as much. And people tend to be far more, they help out their neighbors far more. It's more of a community aspect. You know, say the flea markets
yep.
are a good example of that. Like you have the flea markets, and it's nearly like you're nearly bartering and trading in a more primitive way than this mass capitalism where industrialists are completely fleecing the bottom half of the workforce.
Has your time in Berlin changed the way you think about that?
Yeah,
About yeah.
I completely see their side of the argument way more than I used to. So this is the
Okay.
Brendan and Dad are very, very pro
Yeah.
that, and I can see why. Like modern industrialists and capitalists are completely fleecing um, the bottom half of the workforce. You know,
But the big question though is like, what's the lesser of the two evils? Would say, or the
that's like the biggest possible
but,
question
but
there is.
but like if we just look at like history and stuff, like which one has worked longer, or which one has been more successful for longer periods of time?
Agreed, and I know that side of the argument very, very well. But part of my journey in my own learning in the past few years was I got to a stage maybe 2, 3 years ago where I was like, okay, I know my side very, very well. You know, stoicism, fitness, the high protein diet, capitalism, all these things. What if I did things the exact opposite? So why does the
It's time
vegan
to play devil's advocate here.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like Rich Roll is like, one of the people I probably look up to the most that's alive right now. And he's a vegan, very, very kind of, socialist. He's an ultra runner and he doesn't really lift too much weights. Like, so I've started listening to people from the other side, because who am I to say I'm on fucking either side, really? I don't really know what the fuck I'm at. I'm just trying to be curious and learn.
Yeah, look, it's obviously that's probably that's the approach that we all should have. There shouldn't be one side or the other. There should be, okay, let me take some bits from this side, let me take some bits from this side, and then let me form my own opinion on where, or you don't even have to lie somewhere, like, because like you're saying stuff there where, like, with socialism and communism, where, like, the importance of community and helping your neighbor out, which is true, like that's very, very important. And like when you look to the West, you would say, like I even look at my time in Canada and stuff, and like you're living in fucking a big city, you don't know who your neighbor is, they don't care who you are, like, you lose a lot of that. Even being in the Middle East, you see how close they are here, and how community and family, and like there's no homeless people here, there's no drug addicts. Like,
Let
I
me
asked someone why that happens. They go, it's just your family wouldn't allow it. And if there is people who don't have a home, there's places for them that they can go. The facilities are there, they have the services. So it's just like, it's interesting seeing how different cultures, and they respond to these things differently, and it does make you change your own it just makes you open your mind up a little bit, not be so closed in, okay, this is the only way that we should do it.
Yeah, exactly. And let me put 2 points just there on what you're saying. The first is, I think Ireland is an absolutely brilliant place because it seems to be right in the middle. You still have the community and family element without
Mm.
this, huge industrialist problem that many of Western cultures have, as in, like, no one knows each other's name, no one gives a fuck about anyone else. There's, drug addicts and alcoholics everywhere. You don't really have that problem on as big a scale as an England or a America or a Germany or even a France. Okay, so Ireland is an
Yeah,
absolutely brilliant place because it seems to be right in the middle of the boat. And because Ireland's so small, people care about each other and they know each other and their communities a lot better. It's hard to see that when you live in Ireland, but when you go traveling, you can see that.
of course, yeah, definitely.
And then the second thing is, Brennan, I'm talking to you maybe for an hour now. Have I given you a proper explanation on what the difference between capitalism, socialism, and communism is?
No.
No, because I still don't know. Because I'm still asking that question all the time. I'm still reading about that all the time. I'm still listening to people talking about that all the time. Of course, I know some things about communism and socialism and fascism, and I'm pretty well read and educated on all these different things. But it's very, very hard to define. Very, very hard to define. It's very easy to listen to something on the news now or in a podcast right now or on social media and say, oh, he's a communist, he's a fascist, he's a Nazi. But we haven't a fucking clue what those terms even mean. One of
Mm.
the people I took the tour with, absolute Australian guy, so intelligent and so well educated on history. He said that if you hear someone saying that it was an anti-fascist communist, he said they're a very, very dangerous person because they don't realize that a fascism and a communism are 90% the same. So an Antifa type person, which, me and you, we don't mind saying here, we think they're absolute fucking lunatics, Antifa. Um,
Yeah,
he said they're some of the most dangerous people in the whole world because they don't realize how similar communism and fascism is in the end goal.
as in, like, a lot of people end up dying.
You pretty much murdered,
Yeah.
you know, like Stalin's
Mm.
famous quote, one death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic. In fascism and communist states, you have the million deaths. You have millions and millions and millions of deaths. And it's one thing if it's war, okay, this country is at war with that country to have a million deaths. But when it's your own government putting you in internment camps or whatever, lining people up against a wall and killing them, murdering them in massive numbers. That's very different to, it's kind of like a cleansing, to an ethnic cleansing, or just kind of kill all the bourgeoisie or the business owners or the kulaks like the Soviets did. It's far, far, far more disturbing than one country fighting with another country. It's like they're picking
Yeah,
certain aspect of their own society and their own people and just murdering them all in enormous numbers.
yeah, it's fucked up, man.
All right, so that brings us to um,
Berlin.
to Berlin. So we're off on tangents here. These are my favorite type of conversations, absolute favorite. So I'm hoping that at least 10, 20% of my audience will find this as fascinating as me and you do. So we'll bring into Berlin, you have areas in the city. You have Neukölln, which is where I lived. What did you think of Neukölln?
Yeah, it was cool, man. I liked it. I liked it. Would it be fair to say that like it was quite the area that we were in was like influence. It was a Middle Eastern type, like Turkish, like
Yeah,
a lot of the shops, the food places, the shawarmas. All there was a lot of that sort of that was like the
exactly. Yeah.
the the ethnic the ethnicity would say.
Yeah, yeah. I think from what I gather as well, Neukölln is like, it's like, oh, I'm a real Berliner because I'm from Neukölln type job.
Okay, okay.
Some
I liked it though. I liked it though. It was cool. It was
mm,
cool. Even though it was a good bit. It's a bit outside, like we'll say, the actual like center of Berlin.
mm.
It's definitely like it's like, would you call it like a suburb?
Oh, yes, but it's still very easy to get to.
Oh, easy. Like that's everywhere. And to be fair, actually, the public transport is you're very well connected.
I
Like you
think it was
get to
only
get to
15.
places.
I was only 15 minutes to the Alexanderplatz on a U on the U-Bahn.
Yeah. I just when I was looking at it from distance wise, it was like, oh, it's a bit of a. It looks on the map like a bit of a spin, but it's actually not that.
It does, but it's not at all. It's not at all. But it's an
No.
enormous city. Berlin is the second, or it's the biggest city in the EU.
Yeah, I
Not
didn't know
many
that. Yeah,
people, yeah, not many people know that. It's the biggest city in the EU, and it's the second biggest
second
in
biggest in Europe,
EU behind
behind London.
London. That yeah.
I was listening. I was listening.
So you have Neukölln, and then you have Friedrichshain and Kreuzberg, which are both. I think Kreuzberg is actually West Berlin, but it's got an East Berlin feel to it.
Okay, Kreuzberg is where we went and got like the burger, wasn't it?
Where all the nightclubs were, is where we got the burger. It's where all the kind of pubs, the bars and that are. It's
Yeah,
really
cool area. Cool area.
such a cool area, and it's pure hipster capital. But it's not aesthetic.
Yeah,
It's really cool because it's so unaesthetic.
yeah. A lot like that burger place. Hipsters everywhere. Outside, people drinking cans. Well, they do that a lot of the play, a lot of over there. But
Hmm.
yeah, there was a good atmosphere. There was a good vibe there. The night the
Well,
night we went there.
well, essentially any city you could say that about Britain. Like, whether you go to any city in Europe or even America, it's like, what do you have? You have people drinking cans, you have bars, you have nightclubs, you have people wearing a certain type of clothes.
No, man, I don't see people drinking cans on the street though. That was alien enough to me. I haven't seen that since like back in the day when people were drinking cans in the street in Ireland. You can't drink cans in the street in North America. No, can you fuck?
Okay,
You'd be
interesting.
like, yeah, very, very. No, maybe I'm not sure about other European cities that I've been to. I haven't seen it too much. I was just like often surprised with people just like drinking cans on the street in Berlin. It
Yeah.
was like it reminded me of Morris back
It's a
in the day.
real thing. It's a real thing, isn't it? Yeah, like the bottle banks
Oh yeah,
back in the day.
yeah, absolutely, yeah, it is, 100%.
But anyway, my point was that like nightclubs are nightclubs, clothes are clothes, bars are bars. It's hard to articulate exactly well what's different about them in Berlin versus London or Rome. It's unless you actually go and live it and experience it.
Yeah, true.
Neukölln, then Friedrichshain and Kreuzberg, they're East Berlin kind of vibe, hipster vibe, and then you have Charlottenburg, which is the West Berlin, and it's far wealthier,
It looked a bit swankier in
cleaner.
general.
Yeah, newer buildings, just far better place. And then that's where the most expensive rent would be, and the
Okay.
most expensive restaurant and all that type of stuff. But like the East Berliners don't give a fuck for that. They hate capitalism. You know, free Julian Assange job.
Yeah, Antifa and the boys.
Yeah, and then we actually were right beside an Antifa protest,
Protest. Yeah.
beside, beside the Brandenburg Gate. And then you have Meta and Alexanderplatz. I love Meta and Alexanderplatz. They're two favorite places in Berlin.
Yeah, Alexanderplatz was cool as well. I think that was definitely Johnny's favorite place.
Mm. But but it he spent all his time there, really, didn't he? It's the whole week.
Literally, yeah, literally. He get up in the morning at like 7 a.m. and just go to Alexanderplatz.
I love Alexanderplatz. I think it's so cool, and it's kind of like
It's cool. The area outside of like where all the big shops are, where we went to get like cookies, and we went to a few of the stores, like the shops and stuff. That was a nice little area.
And for anyone listening, that's where the TV tower is, and Karl
Yeah.
Marx Alley. You have Karl Marx Strasse and Karl Marx Alley. I lived right beside Karl Marx Strasse.
Yeah. And then what was Karl Marx Alley? That's just like a
It used to be called Stalin Alley.
okay.
This enormous road going straight through Berlin that the Russians were conquered to break down the final resistance of the Nazis in World War II.
Okay, cool.
So we have history. I have the history museums. Then I have the art. So I have the art museums. And then I have the techno clubs. And then just finally a little bit on food.
Yep, sounds good.
Yeah.
So what were the history tours?
Looking at this list, it's crazy how much I got through in 2 months. It's absolutely crazy. And I still missed an awful lot. I didn't get to go to Fashion the concentration camp, the German spy or espionage museum, the DDR museum was closed, the Jewish museum, I didn't get to go to any of them, which I'm a bit sickened about, to be honest, because I really wanted to go to some of them. But anyway, the first history tour I went was a tour of Silo Heights. So it was on that road, Stalin Alley or Karl Marx Alley, as it's called now, goes on a road all the way east, nearly directly towards Russia. So when the Germans were losing World War II, they were trying to keep the Russians back, the Soviet army back. After Stalingrad, huge turning point in the war. We won't go into Stalingrad because we could talk about that all day. But huge turning point in the war. They captured the German Fifth Army, which was the army that famously took over France, and Paris captured that. So they captured 400,000 of them, killed nearly every single one of them. 400,000 in Stalingrad.
Insane.
And then they started making their way west until they were what Stalin called to get into the heart of the fascist beast, which was Berlin. So we're going to go straight into the heart of the fascist beast and take over, kill fascism, take over Germany. So this battle now there was many battles on the way, but this one is a famous one, Silo Heights. 35,000 Soviets died in this battle in Silo Heights. This area now I think it's probably the size of Clermont, I'd say.
And
Right.
where was it exactly in Berlin? How far outside of Berlin?
About 45 minutes an hour outside Berlin, near the Polish border. Okay, so I did a
Okay, so
4 hour history tour, 5 hour history tour on that.
wow.
No, what am I on about? It was 7, 8 hours. Sure, I was gone from the morning to the evening. It was
And
dark.
was it a significant battle? Because you don't hear like I'm not as much of a history buff as you, like in
You
general,
wouldn't.
especially not World War II. But is Silo Heights like I watched a decent amount on. I've never really it's not one that I've heard much about, to be honest, at all.
We don't know much about the Eastern Front at all in World War II. We're not educated on it in the West.
Okay,
So
okay, that makes sense.
some people love saying stupid shit like, "Oh, it was the Russians or the Soviets," okay? And then some people love saying stupid shit on the other side, like, "Oh, America bet the Nazis." It was neither. They completely needed each other. Both sides would not have bet Nazi Germany without each other, and they heavily relied on each other. That's how strong Nazi Germany was. So, anyways, the Tour Silo Heights, 35,000 Soviet soldiers died, 12,000 Germans died. So that's 47,000 roughly. Soviets were famous for skewing data, so God only knows how accurate that data is. But there was so many people. This is less, again, this is 1940s. It's less than 100 years ago. It's one of the last battles before the Battle of Berlin. There was so many people died in this battle that when they were doing a bike track in the area after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the fall of communism in the early 90s, they were doing a bike track from Berlin all the way out to Silo. Really good tourist idea, because before that,
Okay.
under the collectivization of the communist system, you had the only thing you were allowed to do there is a pig farm, more
Okay.
communist lunacy. Even though it was a brilliant farming area. So what they did was to draw a bit of tourism out there to start doing up the area again after communism, that they were going to have this bike track from Berlin all the way out. And I saw it, it's class. But they dug up, I think it was 4,000 bodies or something on the bike track.
What?
Yeah.
That's fucked.
Again, go to fact checkers to find the exact number. But like, it's insane how many dead people, and the Soviets just literally threw dead soldiers into the ditch. So many of them died. The only reason they bet Nazi Germany was because they had so much more people. Like
Yeah.
Germans, like only half of the amount of German soldiers died that communists or that Soviets did, and the Soviets still won.
Mm.
But no, the Soviets weren't just Russians. They were Ukrainians. They were a lot of other countries that way. But there was a woman doing up her driveway in Silo 10, 15 years ago, and she was digging it up, obviously getting someone to dig it up and tarmac it. And she found 5 bodies in the driveway.
Imagine.
I
In
know.
Quebec.
I know. Isn't it crazy? And this is recent history. This is very, very recent history.
Yeah. I think we forget that a lot of the time, don't we? That it is so recent.
Mm. Well, I'm a bit obsessed with World War II, but that'll just give people a glimpse into, like, it's impossible to put. It's like the Stalin quote: "One death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic." These numbers are so big that we can't even comprehend them.
Yeah,
And
when you hear
the horror is so extreme. It's so Lord of the Rings style horror that we can't even imagine what it was like.
no, when you said 400,000, I just thought to myself in my head while you were saying it, I was like, that's Crow Park filled up 5 times.
Hmm.
5 Crow Parks.
And
80 by.
that's just the German Fifth Army or the German Fourth Army in Stalingrad. That's not even the Russians.
It's insane.
So that was that tour. Very, very interesting, fascinating. I don't want to sound cold here, just like talking about that many people dying, but I think it's worth looking up. That type of history, it interests so many people. I'm fascinated by it. I know plenty listening here will find that very, very interesting. And I hope to take the time to look into the Eastern Front. I would recommend Dan Carlin's Ghosts of the Ostfront series. I'd recommend that. That's audio. So Hardcore History, Ghosts of the Ostfront, and also the Gulag. If you read the Gulag Archipelago, it's not an easy read. Alexander
No,
Solzhenitsyn.
I had to stop. I had to stop.
Did you?
Well, I read it. I just chose a terrible time in 2018 when I was on prep. I was just like, no, I can't do this. After about maybe 50 pages, I never went back to reread.
I actually chose a brilliant time to read it. I read it in the first lockdown when I was at nothing else.
Perfect. Yeah.
So I think if you read the Gulag Archipelago, if you read, I'd say Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, and if you listened to Ghosts of the Ostfront, you'd have a good taste or a pretty good education on just how horrific the Eastern Front was from those 3 texts.
Yeah.
So then the other tour I did was Hitler's Germany, which we went through like all the buildings and all the Nazi sites. So it was like up the Brandenburg Gate. You saw the Brandenburg Gate. It's class, isn't it?
Is that how you were able to tell us? Remember when we left? We went to the Berlin Wall and we went to the museum, the Free Museum, and then we scooted then to like Checkpoint Charlie, and you were able to be like, "Look, that's one of the." You were able to say that's one of the Nazi buildings right there. I is that because of Hitler's Germany? Because I felt when you pointed out to me, I was like, where? I was like really interested because I wanted to see was there a distinct difference in the way that building looked to like a lot of the other buildings that are just there now. And there was something I remember at the time. Either you told me or I noticed it about the distinctiveness of was it the size of the windows or the size of the height of there was something about that building.
The building, the Nazis were so crazy in so many ways, obviously, Joe. But you ask someone to educate yourself on why the Nazis were crazy, and they won't be able to tell you fuck all, apart from the concentration camps, Joe, which you should know an awful lot more about the Nazis than the concentration camps, like, because everything they were doing was just not everything, but like so much of what they were doing was just insane in terms of uh, how well it worked, inverted commas. They made themselves into a complete superpower very, very quickly at the
Yeah.
cost of millions of lives, obviously. So with the buildings, the buildings were like they made these buildings appear like huge doors way up higher off the ground than other buildings. And when you'd walk by them, you'd think, oh my God, it's giants working in here. And we're looking down on you type thing. So they were
Almost
really,
godlike, like out of this world kind of.
exactly. And they were really, really big into symbolism. And Hitler was obsessed with symbolism. So that Nazi Germany tour was class as well. And they Nazified a lot of the old German buildings like the Reichstag, Brandenburg Gate, like they
Right,
Nazified.
hey, the Reichstag is impressive. It's a fucking big building.
Mm,
It's sheer the sheer size of it is impressive.
yeah, yeah. And um, do you know the last battle of World War II? Berlin, the Battle of Berlin, which was the last battle was to get in the Reichstag. And you know that famous photo of them storming the Reichstag?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So the communist flag over the Reichstag, really, really famous. Putin made a military Disneyland about 4 or 5 years ago. You should look this up on Google, where the
You
kids,
told me, yeah.
yeah, where kids can reenact that. You know, in Russia, this World War II is called the Great Patriotic War. So it's like how they beat fascist invaders and they sent them back to Germany or whatever. So there's huge memorials to Soviet Union soldiers in a good few places in Germany. And they portrayed themselves as, rescuing babies and saving everyone from fascism when a lot of what they did was just as bad as any fascist and a lot worse.
Propaganda again, propaganda. Soviet
Yeah,
propaganda.
of course. Yeah, so that's the Reichstag, that museum Hitler or that tour Hitler's Germany was just fascinating. And then so I'm gonna name quickly some historic sites that I looked at or toured
Yep,
around, spent a few hours looking at, spent another few hours researching them. Either I take out the phone and Google them,
yep.
or I'd sit in a coffee shop before they go in there or after going there and read all about it and then go and tour it and see it in person. So like the Berlin Wall
Let's drink
Museum,
2 coffees and 2 cookies.
there we go. There we go. Now we're talking. So to the Berlin Wall Museum, the Brandenburg Gate. I was at the Brandenburg Gate like 5 times. I think the Brandenburg Gate is so cool. I love the Brandenburg Gate. I just I
Yeah, I
just
thought it
love
was really cool.
I just love being around it. It's so historic. It's so like imposing. It looks so well. I just love the Brandenburg Gate. Checkpoint Charlie Museum, the Reichstag. So Checkpoint Charlie quickly was the only way for East Berliners to go to West Berlin and West Berliners go to East Berlin. Because if you tried to climb over the wall, you got shot. So that was the where the Soviets soldiers met the American soldiers, and there was this passing over. Okay, you can go here, you can go there. You need your papers, 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 papers. The you can't go here without your papers. You can't go there without them. It was such a communist thing, but it was actually a very fascist thing as well. It's a very totalitarian state. That's why the amount of freedom and the amount of that shit we let governments away with during COVID is absolutely criminal if you know your history. Like you need your papers, you need your badge, you need your ID to travel anywhere. Taking away
Man,
people. freedom. Fucking criminal. Like if you're
It's
ignorant,
still the same. It's still the same in Cuba. When we were in Cuba, papers. You need your papers. What's Cuba? A communist. Even to this day, like as a tourist, as a local, papers, 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 papers.
and like
Crazy.
Jordan Peterson says, like setting up mock totalitarian states to deal with COVID is not necessary. Okay, like whatever this lockdown or this whatever we need some sort of response and all that. Setting up mock totalitarian states and giving governments that much power to monitor where you are and where you're going and what you're doing isn't a good thing. Now,
No.
that's an argument for another day. Then Brandenburg, Checkpoint Charlie Museum, the Reichstag, Tempelhofer Feld. I love Tempelhofer Feld. I wish I had been able to bring you to it. So it's that old abandoned airport. It's a huge park, biggest park in Berlin. And
Is that where you used to go running?
well, I won't say I used to go there. It's where I went running.
Okay.
So I went like twice. But I went for a walked through it a few times. So with the Tempelhof Feld, it's an old abandoned airport. And like in any other like city, Western city, they would have like developers would have got hold of this and built loads of buildings and all that. But like in Berlin, because socialism is still so strong and they do so many people for the good of, they do so many things for the good of the people. Still, they they got their hands on it and they were like, we'll turn this into a park, and now it's a beautiful park. And where a lot of people go walking every single day, it's always busy. People walking their dogs, skateboarding on roller skates. In the summer, there's all those little pop-up shops for food and all that. It's class. I love Tempelhofer Feld. But that was the only when East Germany built a wall around West Germany, this airport was the only way to get things in and out because they blockaded all the roads. So this, like, they got coal, they got food, they got everything in through this airport. I think there was a flight flying into Tempelhof every 60 seconds or something. And it was like, we don't care what you do. We're going to make sure that this area stays free. And that's why Kennedy went and he made the Ich bin ein Berliner speech, as in like the West Berliners were really afraid that communists was just going to take them over, roll them over. And the communists would have went all the way to Paris. The Soviets would have went all the way to Paris only for nuclear weapons. So people don't know that either. If you're ignorant of history, you'll think, oh my God, nuclear weapons, no one should ever use them and no one should have ever used them. 100% you're right. But what was the alternative? Communism all the way to Paris, all the way to France. What would Europe look like now? Be no Marshall Plan. And the Marshall Plan was what rebuilt Europe, or a huge help in it. So then the TV tower, Tiergarten, which basically means animal garden. Topography of Terror. You went to Topography of Terror. That's a really cool museum on Nazi Germany.
Yeah, it's a free museum we went to. Yeah,
and you could spend a few hours in that reading that.
Oh, 100%. We were just I was very sick that day. I felt fucked. So I wanted to get going, but I still stood for like, I'd say over an hour. We all did, but like you could have stayed there for like 4 or 5 hours reading the walls. It was very, very interesting. Very, very interesting.
And the Memorial to the Murdered Jews of Europe. So that's people will recognize that from photos. Interestingly, that's just a memorial. It's not actually, nothing actually ever happened there. No one died there. No one was murdered there. Nothing like that. It's just a memorial right in the city center of people who died under National Socialism.
Yeah, we were there, weren't we?
Yeah. The concrete blocks.
Different heights, yeah.
And famously, the artist who made that or who designed that, he never gave any meaning to it, so no one knows what it means.
Yeah.
So like a lot of the best art, it's open to interpretation and you can give it your own meaning. Then Potsdam Palace, I went out to Potsdam and I walked to the palace there where the old Kaisers used to live. And then I missed Sachsenhausen, German Spy Museum, DDR Museum, and Jewish Museum. I didn't get to go to any of them.
Again, you'll get to go there again next time when you're back there to visit in the summer.
Yeah, we'll see. So and I got through an awful lot of the history stuff. Then with the art, I know art isn't really people's buzz, but I love art. I love museums, and art is very, very closely related to history. So a lot of those history museums I was at, there's a lot of art in them. You know, a lot of the art museums, there's a lot of history in them, and they're all influenced by history. So the Kreuzberg street art, Boxhagener Platz flea market. I'm going to call that art because, you know, I'm just going to call that art because I think it's very artistic in terms of the what you can buy at it, the way people dress at it, the way people behave. It's like going to a museum.
But it's open to interpretation, art is, and you interpret that as art. So then there you go. It's art.
Feels like art to me. I could be talking
Yeah.
to art here, but that it feels like art to me. So then the new National Gallery, that was class. That was like the museum that I'm just after going to here in Paris. It's all like new age art from the 1900s to 1945. So that's my one of the periods of history that I'm most interested in. So I found that fascinating. Then the TV and Film Museum, it's very famous as well. Berlin and Germany had a really, really strong film culture before the Nazis, of creating films, and they were the first. I won't say they were the first Hollywood, but they were rivaling Hollywood for a long time.
Okay.
Um,
With just German movies, like German blockbusters.
German movies, but like they would have been directors and actors from all over the world.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. And then, of course,
Did that continue? Did that continue after World War II, or did it ever pick up again?
so no, it definitely always had a culture of creating movies, and you know, because of all the artists and directors and actors and all that, dancers, singers in Berlin. But it got very, very stifled by all the censorship in fascist Berlin,
Yeah.
communist Berlin.
Okay.
But the more you try and censor stuff, the more passionate people become about it, ironically enough. So they still kept it going, but a lot of it was kind of underground. And that's what people say a lot about Berlin is it's an underground music or it's underground art or it's you know, they're so used to people spying on them that there's this kind of like look over your shoulder element to the way people do it.
Yeah.
Then Hamburger Bahnhof, that was a really cool museum as well. So let's move on.
But that was that not a restaurant? No, no one knew.
So let's move on to no doubt the most commonly asked question I get about Berlin, which is techno and the nightclubs.
Yes.
So
First of all, actually,
go on.
did you have a favorite when it comes to the clubs that you went to?
Berghain. Definitely. Berghain is fucking unreal.
Is it something though that you can? I don't know. Is it something? I see. I didn't get into Berghain, so I can't. Like I don't know what's
If
actually
you
like in
didn't
there.
try,
But
you
is
didn't try.
But no, I didn't try. But is it even something though that you can explain, like why you loved it that much? Because I know for myself that like the two clubs that I went to, like it's hard to explain why they were so enjoyable.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know, I like you'd have to just go there and just witness and see and the music and the way people dance, because like I can tell you, oh, the people dance like this, like, and I can try and show you how they dance, but until you're there and you see the way they're dancing,
You know when
matched with the music, with what they're wearing, like then you get it and you're like, okay, now I understand. Do you know?
Well, when I went in 2019, I didn't shut up about Berlin to you for the next 2, 3 years afterwards. And so you kind of had an element of that where I was trying to explain something, but you just can't explain it.
It's just not the same. Like you can be interested and be like, "Fuck, no, that sounds deadly." Like you can't, but it's still like not the same. You know, you still can't relate or you don't understand it truly until you actually go there yourself.
Hmm. Hmm. So I was thinking of a few different ways to explain this. So I went to Berghain, Kit Kat, Trezor, Ritterbuka, Sisyphus, Wildernata, Same Heads, About Blank, and Anomaly Art Club. And they were all class in their own way. But the real Berlin clubs, even like, so this is the way I was thinking of explaining it. So I don't know about you. I think you're the same, Brenton, but I feel like I'm a very lucky person. Okay, so I have this in my head that I'm lucky. I'm gonna get to experience cool things because I know what to say to people, I know how to rope people up the right way, and I know how to just end up having a good time for myself because I can get people to like me. And so many people have said this to me over the last few years, 10 years, 20 years even, is like, oh, geez, you're as lucky. You always end up landing on your feet type thing.
Mm.
And I've tried to look back in hindsight. Where does that come from? Why do I feel so lucky? Why do I always feel like things are going to work out for me? Because these clubs are really, really difficult to get into. You've experienced it. Really hard to get into. Like you can't just rock up to the door and say, "Oh yeah, I'll pay 10 or 20 euro and get in." They're really difficult to get into. But by the same token, I don't think they're as hard to get into as people think because they're massive. There's 1 or 2 thousand people in them. They're like a little festival and they're full every single weekend. So if there's thousands of people coming every single weekend,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
half of them are tourists. How hard can they really be to get into?
Because at any given time they're full with thousands of people, so these people
Exactly.
are getting in.
Yeah,
When you
exactly.
said put it to me like that, when you put it to me like that, I was like, he makes a good point.
Hmm.
It's a good point.
So if there's thousands of people in them every weekend, and I know from talking to people in them, the majority of them, I won't say the majority, at least half of them aren't tourists. Or sorry, are tourists and are in them for the first time ever, like you.
Yeah,
How hard can they be to get into? So, and my answer is not as hard as people think. So, but that's back to feeling lucky. I feel like I'm a lucky person when I walk up to the door of a place and everyone's like, "Oh my God, you can't go there," or "You won't get in," or "It's impossible to get in." I always think the opposite. I'm always like, "Well, why can't I?" You know. And I was thinking, where does that kind of come from? And I'll tell you a good story. Um, so when I was growing up, I had cousins, lads on all sides, and good things were just happening to them. I'm sure bad things were happening to them too, but I only heard the good news, you know?
yeah,
Like I had cousins in Dublin. I won't name names because there's no point to it, but I had cousins in Dublin. They were hilarious, very, very funny. One of them kicked a drop goal, winning drop goal in the Leinster Cup final. And when I'm watching this stuff and I'm hearing about this, I'm thinking like, so it's going to be my turn soon, you know, whether
yeah.
that's sport or whether it's traveling or whether it's just getting into funny situations. I'm going to have my turn at that crack. And then other cousins on the other side, they won, um, played with Clongowes and won a Leinster Cup. Then Shane was captain of the Mayo Miners, Shane and Trevor, and they were just brilliant footballers. Then there was these second, third cousins that I don't think I ever met. Maybe I met them once, but when they were on a J1, I'm pretty sure it was a J1. This is a brilliant story, and this is actually why I got into all the clubs. Is because they went on a J1 or they were in America, and AC Milan were playing Chelsea at the time. I'll put up photos of this. So what they did was they pretended to be journalists, and AC Milan were playing Chelsea in New York or Boston, one of those two cities, and they called themselves, "Oh, I'm Brian O'Driscoll, an Irish journalist." And the Yanks who were at the door, the American boys, were like, "All right, thank you," and they gave them press passes, and they were literally in the dugout with Mourinho, Roman Abramovich, the soccer players, getting photos with them, right? And it was in the newspaper when they got back, just by chancing their arm, just by chancing their arm. So one of my life mottos, not just about everything, about me trying to do anything, open a business, manage football teams, get clients, do anything. One of my mottos for life is, if you don't ask, the answer is always no.
Mm.
Okay? If you don't, how do you get into one of the best nightclubs in the world? Well, if you don't try, you have 0% chance.
I'm gonna write that one.
Yeah. So if you don't ask, the answer is always no. And very closely related to that point would be uh, the worst thing that can happen is you get a no. So you're going to try this, you're going to try that, you're going to ask for this, you're going to ask for a mentor, you're going to ask for business advice, you're going to ask for whatever it is. Well, if you don't
But
ask,
I asked for this girl's number on the street,
there you
shit
go.
like that.
There you go, which you're an expert for. The worst that can happen is you get refused. So people think, oh, you queue up for, one of these clubs and you're in there for, you're trying to get in for a few hours to have one of these incredible travel experiences, one of the best clubs in the world. the worst thing that can happen is you queue up for an hour or two and they turn you away. You know, some people take that as if it's so personal, as in, oh my God, you know, I got turned away. What a fuck. And you can see them when you're lining up for the clubs, they get getting turned away and they're taking it so personally. I would just wouldn't take it personally. If I get a no with anything that I'm trying to do, it's just like, well, it's not my night. I'm not lucky enough. I'll just try
Yeah,
again.
yeah. I'll try again. Exactly.
Yeah. So I think all I did to get in to these clubs that so many people get turned away from, but so many people get turned away from, they'll say 50, 60%. I think someone said 80% during the summer of people get turned away from Berghain. 80% of people queuing up get told no. Nine.
That's 80-20. Hey, that's 80-20 at work right there.
Yeah, that's what I read online. That's what I read on eight. Imagine 80% of people getting told no. So they're really hard to get into. But on the other hand, like I said, they're not as hard as people think because there's thousands of people in them, and most of them are tourists, or half of them are tourists every week. So I just read, wear all black. You know, don't be afraid to go alone. Going alone is a real popular thing in Berlin, to go clubbing alone. And you should look like it's your scene. You should look like you're into electronic music. You shouldn't look like you're a tourist. As in, oh my God, look at this. Wow, look at it. Like, if you're like that, you're gonna just look
The
like a
fuck out of it.
tourist. Yeah, you're gonna look like tourist from a mile away, and people will just, the bouncer will just look at you and say no.
Yeah.
So I got in 3 times in a row. I was hoping when I was there 2 months I was going to get into the best nightclub in the world, you know, where Krystal Klear was DJing. I was going to get in once, and I got in 3 times, and it was absolutely epic each time. So my advice to anyone would be, tell yourself you're a lucky person, not just to do with this, but to do with anything. Yeah, and you have this as well, Keen. Just act like things are going to work out for the best. Don't be a negative person. Don't be thinking, oh my God, this could go wrong. And what if this? And what if you get turned away and you queued for an hour? Don't worry about that.
Who
First
gives
time,
up?
yeah. First time I went, I got turned away. Then I got in 3 times in a row. Um, so wear all black, go online, look at the tips, and try and get in. And if you don't get in, it's not the end of the world.
I think you said something else that was very good. It's a great piece of advice for getting in. It's just, or you said this about what they're looking for when you get there, the bouncer. It's basically just a vibe check,
Yeah, yeah,
which
that's all.
which when you said that, that just makes so much sense. They're just seeing if you match the vibe, and if you match the vibe, they're going to let you in. If you don't, they're going to tell you to go.
If you look like you're going to be chanting "Ole, ole, ole," or starting a fist fight, or looking around and hassling girls, like we know these characters in a lot of nightclubs, and I'm not going to say
Yeah,
Irish nightclubs, because I've been in nightclubs in Europe where the same characters have been. If you look like that whatsoever, you have zero chance of getting in.
yeah.
So fist fighting, chanting, foot sports chants, or like hassling women, you know, just being a creep.
Harassment. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
harassment. Yeah.
just being a creep. You just won't get in. So that's pretty simple advice. That's what I would say. And you shouldn't be worried about trying and not getting in. That would be my other advice. And the thing about vibe check as well is, like, if you're into techno music, you kind of have a bit of a vibe about you. You know, like, I could tell you all of the artists and all the DJs that play, and I could tell you, you know, why this artist is big now at the minute, or, you know, like Tale of Us are really, really famous right now. They've played Berghain a few times. You know, Krystal Klear is a very, very normal DJ. Solomon, you know, there's nearly all of the main DJs in the world have played, techno DJs in the world have played Berghain at some stage or another. It's not nearly as mental or as crazy as people make it out to be.
Still pretty crazy, I'd say, though, when you get in there. See, I
Oh,
don't know because I wasn't in there.
it is. Well, some people might not know, listening to this, is that you're not allowed. So they take your phone and they put stickers over the camera and the front and the back. And they did it to you when you were in the 2 clubs you were in. You can't
Yep.
take any photos or any videos, which is class, isn't it, Brent?
It is. It is. It is. It's really, really cool. It just everyone is living in the moment. Like, it sounds like cringy, but it's true. Like, everyone is just there. Like, they're dancing to the music. They're talking to each other. Like this. The one thing that like rubbed me a little bit wrong at Tale of Us in Amsterdam was the fact that everyone had their fucking phone out for the whole thing, And all they were doing, and I was guilty too. I took obviously some videos. You're just focused on taking videos of the set, and you're like, yeah, this is going to be savage. This is going to look deadly. Like whatever, if you're going to put it on Instagram or you want it for yourself. But in Berlin, there was none of that.
I'll tell
Now
you,
the only downside,
I was
there's only one downside, is if you meet a girl and you're trying to get her number or her Instagram and you don't have your phone. Oh no, if you don't have your phone, because in KitKat they took away the phones, so you didn't have a phone to write it down. So you have to maybe, I don't know what's the solution to that one, but that's the only small limitation.
yeah.
It happened to me a few times. My memory was a bit off that night, and I was trying to remember.
Trying to remember
work out.
phone numbers.
No, not phone numbers. That was too far. Instagrams.
Yeah. So, but that's part of the appeal, is like you go to the club, you forget about life for a few hours, and you leave again.
Yeah.
So, which is what a club should be like. And people are way less pretentious. There's like way less of a like cliquey kind of VIP element. They hate VIP areas. There's no
Yeah.
VIP areas in any of the clubs. It's all about the music.
Yeah, which got me going. Definitely got me going. I'm not too big into. I've been to VIP at festivals, and it's just, even here actually recently at F1, it's very different. It's not the same.
There's pretentious elements to everything, but like it does not appeal to me whatsoever. You know, kind of.
No, it's not in that environment when you just want to dance.
So one of my best club experiences actually ever was in Berghain. So I wasn't even going to go to Berghain that night. I was meant to go to a different club, but something happened and I went to Berghain instead. So I queued up, went in, and this was.
How long did you queue for that night?
Each time I queued, it was an hour to an hour and a half. But last summer, people queued for 6 to 8 hours to get in.
Whoa,
I know. Imagine 6 to 8 hours to get into a nightclub. And
that's
like
insane.
every time I went there was a queue, a really long queue, every time, you know. And when I left, there was a really long queue. So it's not like other nightclubs where like, you know, there's a start, a middle, and an end to the night, and everyone leaves at the end. It's like Paris here. It's the start of the night and the end of the night, the whole way through. You know, there's constantly people coming and people going, and you know, people go to the nightclub, like we were saying already, at any time. You know, literally any time. Like wake up in the morning, they go at midday, they go in the evening, they go at nighttime.
Yeah, shouldn't you tell me this usually is it the Sunday or the Saturday at Berghain? It's during the day, is like where that's when you want to be there.
Sunday during the day is famous, yeah. But like the you got a taste of this as well, and Johnny said it as well, and Brendan, is like the time doesn't really seem to matter in Berlin at all. You can do anything at any time of the day. You go to the gym at 11 o'clock at night and it's full. You know, you go shopping at any time, it's full. Or it's not full, but it's like doesn't really matter what time of the day you go do your shopping. I saw a massive Spotify poster and it said something about, I think it was Billie Eilish that was on it, something about sleep, and then the catch line underneath it was, like anyone around here knows anything about sleep. The people, it's like really a city that doesn't sleep, like New York or Vegas or whatever.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I was in there and Armin van, so it's heavy techno downstairs and more disco and house upstairs in Panorama Bar. And Armin van Helden came on Sunday at about maybe 1, 2 o'clock. I Want Your Soul, and the place went mental. It's like when you're at a good gig or a good festival and one song just comes on. It was like a few years ago, I was at, not Metropolis, the other one.
Forbidden Fruit?
Forbidden Fruit, yeah. And Dennis Sulta played Kylie Minogue.
Can't get you out of my head.
No, it wasn't Can't Get You Out of My Head. It was like Love at First Sight.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, when they just like they throw in like a groover at the perfect time and everyone just goes mental. It was unreal. It's absolutely unreal. So like I would encourage, I was talking about this at length already, but like I'd encourage anyone to just try it. If you don't get in, just go to one of the other clubs that's not as difficult to get into.
Yeah, there's plenty of other ones as well.
But like they have the whole place. Another thing about Germans is they have the best cloakrooms I've ever seen. So like everything is perfectly organized so no one loses anything. And a few people told me they have excellent lost and founds as well. So like basically you can give any amount of stuff into the cloakroom and it's just perfectly organized. And the cloakrooms are massive and they're really efficiently run. It's just gas how efficient they are at everything.
Yeah, they do. They run an awful tight ship with the cloakrooms. I saw
You,
that for myself as well.
yeah, and they're pure friendly. Once like they have this reputation like, oh, it's awful hard to get in, or the doormen are pure rude or whatever. You know, they'll just turn your way and say nine or whatever. But like once you get in, everyone is so friendly. Like the bar people, the people working in the club, the people doing the cloakroom, everyone is just so friendly and nice to each other. Even on the
Yeah, yeah,
wristbands,
that's
to take care of yourself and take care of each other, and you know all that. It's just it's gas. Electronic music kind of has that as a culture, it's all inclusive, kind of look after each other, LGBTQ plus friendly and all that crack. Uh,
yeah, yeah.
so
In
like
in Berlin, actually, it was very LGBTQ plus friend. Like there was a lot of everything there.
yeah.
Like yeah. Well, like I think it's pretty well known that like gay men particularly like love partying. Like
Mm.
they go hard when it comes to partying, and obviously they're within that banner, like that group. So I think they keep the party going. Definitely, I could see that in Berlin as well.
Dude, they bring the energy. They bring the energy. So
They
yeah.
fucking do. Jesus,
Like
yeah.
I was talking to people before and they're saying they go deliberately to gay bars. It's quite a common thing that people look out for gay bars and they go to them because they're the most crack and the best energy or whatever. And I can
Yeah, and the women don't have to worry about getting hit on as well, which
exactly,
is
and
probably nice.
women love gay bars as well. I've heard that numerous times. So look, if you haven't got an open mind, I suppose Berlin is not the place for you. But if you haven't got an open mind, nowhere really is the place for you, is it? So just before we leave Techno, actually, I was at a boiler room set, first time ever at a boiler room set, in Anomaly Art Club, and it was absolutely epic. Through a friend over there, got on the guest list and got to skip the queue. Now, Anomaly Art Club is
What
a
what was the
highly rated club.
sorry? What was I was going to say? Ask you on the boiler room. What was the vibe like at a boiler room set versus just like a normal, would say like DJ back to back type thing? Like was the vibe much different? Was it the same? Like
See, there's more nightclubs per capita than anywhere else in the world in Berlin. There's more artists living there than anywhere else in the world per capita, and there's more museums. Now, I can stand to be corrected on any one of those points, but I've read all of those three. Some Mexican fella I met actually told me that Mexico City had more museums. Maybe I'm wrong, but you take my point. More spies, more
yeah,
nightclubs, more whatever. So with the nightclubs, like you have the really, really Berlin clubs that are mainly for Berliners and Berlin hipsters. And then you have the clubs that like you can buy a ticket for, you know, which like an Anomaly Art Club is one of them. You could buy a ticket for this boiler room set, so anyone could buy a ticket and go to it, and you're not going to get kicked out unless you do something stupid that will get you kicked out of basically any nightclub. Whether the other
yeah.
clubs like you could just look the wrong way and then you're not getting in. With the boiler room set, you bought a ticket, it was a sold out thing, and the nightclub was just class. And the vibe there was definitely very different to the Berlin clubs. There's a lot more tourists, you know, because it was a safe bet. You just bought a ticket and you got in. And but the music was actually very, very similar. And the club was quite similar to one of the more distinctive Berlin clubs as well.
And was everyone just like like around the D? You know what a boiler room set? Usually you've got like everyone is just around the DJs.
Yeah, there was a bit of that to it, but it was more like a normal techno nightclub. I can't say it looked
Okay.
too much like what you see on YouTube.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
There seemed to be a bit more of a camera type setup, but they still did the Berlin thing where they put stickers over your camera on the way in.
Okay. So you couldn't video. Okay.
No, so you couldn't, well, you couldn't, you weren't supposed to video or whatever. So,
Yeah.
but every club of the clubs I was at did that um except for Ritter Buca. That was the only one that didn't. All the rest of them did.
Okay. Wow. Every one of them, and you named out like what 8 or 9 different clubs.
Yeah, funny. It
Mm.
sounds so mental until you actually go there and experience it. And they would think it's mental not to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? If you were out videoing your phone, they'd be like, "What the hell is this about?" Like,
I wonder, is that how they feel when they see it all over Instagram, like, especially the Tale of Us stuff, because that's, I've noticed it myself, like
no,
everyone's videoing a Tale of Us.
the thing with Tale of Us is they've obviously seen that people love taking videos at gigs. The Tale of Us boys are like unbelievably creative, the two of them. So like I'm a huge Tale of Us fan for maybe 3, 4 years. That digital art, they're huge into that. And they have been for a long time. And I was at actually the first ever Tale of Us show where anima was presented in Printworks, and they played Running. Do you remember Running? Oh my God! Like when it came up on screen, and when that tune came on, people didn't know what to think. Like it was like, oh
It
my.
was revolutionary, wasn't it?
It was revolutionary, yeah, and that's the way that those shows are going to go. Eric Prides does something similar now, and I think more and more acts are going to like start having these. They're almost like
Holograms.
avatars. They're almost.
Oh, wow.
I think most artists are going to have these kind of like avatars or like digital shows behind their music.
Yeah, oh, yeah. I agree. It's probably gonna go like that. But I
Yeah,
can see like massive pushback from the Berliner types to be like, this is taken away from like where everyone's just videoing, everyone is watching the screen, and it's taken
yeah,
away from
yeah,
which I get. I understand that too.
yeah. Well, for me personally, I've always felt like a bit of an outsider in any scene. I don't see myself as a GA person. I definitely don't see myself as a techno person. I definitely don't see myself as like
What
an artist or a creative. I don't see
what
myself.
about a gym bro? What about a gym bro?
I don't see myself as a gym bro. Now maybe other people see me as, oh, he's a gym bro or he's a GA head or he's whatever, but I don't really think I'm 100% any one of those. So like objectively I can look at the cool show that Tale of Us presents and be like, just appreciate it for what it is. It's epic, you know. And I
Yeah,
can also go to like the underground scene and see that okay, this is the opposite of that, but it still has its own appeal and it's epic in its own way. Might
yeah. You're
might
quite
fit.
fluid. There's fluidity there.
There is, yeah, there is, and it's like you want to dress a certain way. Doesn't mean that you should hate the way everyone else dresses, or you should label it as okay, they're not as cool as me, or they're not as up to date with me, or they're not as whatever. Insert adjective there. So you should just that's the way I like doing things and appreciate other people for the way they like doing things. You know.
Yeah, yeah. Do you find though that you only develop that skill when you broaden your horizons through with something like traveling and going to visit in different places and seeing different different
Definitely.
ways of doing things?
Definitely, yeah, definitely. Like the less you judge anything, the better. Any person or anything. The less you can judge harshly, especially, the better. The less reactive you can be, as in like, oh, look at them, they're doing that. That's so annoying, or that's not cool, or that's not this or that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Because you suggested something about the one of the historians that did a tour with you and said he was really, really intelligent. And the what I kind of got from what you were saying was that he didn't necessarily he was very educated and he didn't necessarily like just think that like, oh, so communism, socialism is the devil or capitalism is the savior. He kind of understood that there was like pros and cons to both because
of course, and
he was
if I'm doing this podcast properly, I'm not trying to shove my worldview down people's necks. What I'm trying to do is present loads of different information that will make them curious and make them want to explore different types of music, fashion, travel experiences, sports, working environments, and make up their own mind. You know, I'm not trying to force my worldview or my interest down anyone's neck. I'm just trying to present it and let them make up their own mind.
that's fair. That's fair.
And that's what good art should do. So good art, whether it's music, like say you're into uh, rap music a lot more than me. So like whether it's music or whether it's like painting and sculptures or whether it's a film, it's not trying to force you to think this way or do this because that's just propaganda. What it should be just doing is presenting you information or worldview objectively, and then you make up your mind based on your own personal experiences and biases.
Yeah, it'd be great if we'll say, I know none of us really watch too much of it these days, the news, but it'd be great if the news was able to do that, wouldn't it? Instead of it just being like one
Well,
side or the other
from
side.
what I gather, that's exactly what the news used to do, you know. Hence the
Yeah,
rise of podcasts and social media and independent news outlets who are doing that
yeah,
now because the news doesn't do it anymore.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
But that's a bit of a rabbit hole to go down. So we'll start wrapping up.
it is.
So with the food in in Berlin, I
Oh, this will be a very short segment. This will be a short segment.
yeah. So this so this will be an unpopular opinion or a hot take, as Tom Delaney called it in his podcast.
Just hit us.
Eating out is so overrated
There, he said it. Just, are you saying in general or in Berlin?
everywhere.
What are my thoughts? Well, you know me, man. I cook all the time, every day. Like my certain meals that I have, and then I allow myself some flute or some flexibility that if I want to go and eat out, I'll eat out. But generally speaking, like living here, living in Canada all that time, I didn't particularly eat out that much either. Like I would set aside that bit of fucking Domino's once a week, that type job. But that was a takeout. And then if
Exactly the same with
it
me,
was
yeah.
more, yeah, it was more so in Canada where there might be like a gathering of some friends or something, or a wing Wednesday, and you'd head out, and it was more just like for the social aspect. But no, I would probably agree with you, man, that like eating out is not everything. Certainly
Well,
not doing it like 2, 3, 4 times a week.
I'll give my context here. So like I like feeling good, and a huge impact on how good I feel energy levels wise, or just how good I feel about myself, is what I'm eating. And if you eat out too much, you're just eating too much shit. Like you're just eating too much processed calories, too many desserts, too much oil, sugar, fat. You just don't feel good. And like I absolutely love going out for a meal, okay? But
Yeah,
it's very, very overrated. Like there's such a law, the law of diminishing returns really, really applies to eating out, as in like you go for one meal out a week, brilliant, great satisfaction off that. You go for three, four, you actually get less satisfaction out of all four of them.
yeah. I wouldn't disagree with that. I do think the once a week is a nice one though, just to look forward to and to go out for a good meal, like a
Yeah.
good high quality meal that you're going to enjoy, or even if you like trying new stuff, which I've
Yeah.
actually gotten a bit better at myself.
So
But
like
definitely the
when I went out in Berlin, I went to some nice restaurants. I went to just some casual restaurants, some expensive ones, some cheap ones. And every time I went away saying, I can make food nicer than that at home for cheaper with better macros, and I'll feel better afterwards.
uh, I'm the same with when I go out for a burger, or not maybe a steak sometimes, but especially burger. I'm just like, my burgers are nicer than this.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I know what you mean.
So you paid twice the price for something not as nice as you could have made at home. And I like cooking at home. I like making a nice meal. I like listening to a podcast and cooking. So if anyone is looking for advice in terms of like places to eat in France or in Paris or in Berlin, I can't really give them much. I love a dessert. I love a croissant, as you well know. But I would eat them daily, dangerously enough. But going out for meals, very, very overrated, in my honest opinion.
So, with that being said, was there any restaurants that you can recommend from Berlin?
Zola Pizza in Kreuzberg, Grace restaurant, a bit more upmarket in Charlottenburg, and then Pho is the first time I ever had Vietnamese food.
Oh man, it's pho is good.
Was good, yeah. But this restaurant's actually called Pho, and there's a few of them in Berlin, and it was good.
How are you saying?
You'd be sweating, you'd be pure sweating after eating it.
How do you pronounce it though?
Is it Po or Pho?
Oh, it's
It's
just pho.
spelled Pho.
You don't even say the pho. It's just like pho,
All right, okay.
like fu. Yeah, hey, you do be sweating. I was sweating too. When one particular time I got pho, and I was like, I got a very spicy one.
Mm. Worth trying.
It's good food. Oh, definitely, definitely, definitely.
I
I,
had
I,
an
I, I,
absolutely,
I
I
know
had a
you're not
brilliant
too
one
big into it.
in.
I was going to say, I know you're not too big into it, but I got into sushi as well. I really like sushi.
Not a sushi person at all. So like I had pho, and I had Vietnamese in Zurich with Luke as well, and it was brilliant.
Was it Vietnamese? Did he bring you for a Vietnamese sub by any chance? No, or was it pho
No,
as well?
it was like pho, and there was these summer rolls, not spring rolls, summer rolls.
Okay, so
Different season altogether.
the Chinese do the spring rolls, but the Vietnamese do the summer rolls.
There were now
No,
we're talking, yeah. And it's light and feels healthy and you feel good after it.
yeah,
I don't
yeah. I
like
often
I don't like eating food where I feel terrible afterwards. It could be like taste delicious, but you just feel crap afterwards.
mm. Is that usually? Do you feel like that after pasta?
No, I don't. I don't generally.
Okay, that's good because I know some people complain about that after pasta.
Oh, sorry, do I feel like terrible after pasta?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh, I feel awful after too much wheat, gluten, or dairy. I feel awful.
Yeah, that's common.
Mm. I know my from all I've done with dieting and things like that. I just know don't it doesn't agree with me. I know well when I eat more paleo that I just feel far better.
Is pizza the same as well? Do you feel fucked, or does it depend on the pizza, the quality of the pizza?
Depends on the pizza. Depends on the pizza. But
Yeah,
so food places I gave three there, and then good coffee. Like stuff that cafe. Me and you went to class
you're
cafe.
local.
Yeah, my local that I went to most days. Absolutely epic.
That's, that's a gas fucking spot, man.
Yeah, so it was like, as Johnny Garvey said, it was like someone just randomly went in and started nailing bits of wood to the wall, which is a theme in a lot of Berlin joints. Is whether it's a nightclub or it's a cafe or it's a bar, it looks like someone just randomly went in with a hammer and started nailing bits of timber together, and just decided they're going to sell coffee. So
Yeah,
there was like a tree house style thing where you climb up it and you have your coffee on these three couches that looked like they were taken from the side of the road on top of this tree house in the middle of a room that was like someone's sitting room. And then out the
no
front,
wallpaper, no wallpaper on
no
the walls. They
wallpaper.
were just
Yeah. The
no paint.
the lines as well for the electricity wires, they weren't chased. Isn't it chased? But they
When
were,
they're called,
yeah, they were on top of the thing and just pinned to the wall more or less, or sat.
yeah, the roof.
Yeah, it was just a class cafe. So Barn Coffee, Bonanza Coffee Roasters. It was a Japanese or Chinese place, and then Cafe Mita in Mita, right beside Weekday. And the
Yeah, how
gyms
was
were
that?
there. The gyms were what were the gyms like? The gyms were pretty good. But I talked to a German fella over there, and I talked to a lot in the gym, but I talked to one German fella. He said, "Oh, how do you find the gyms here? I've been to London, I've been to England, and people are way bigger and stronger there. And I went to a gym here in Paris, the gym I'm training at now, and he said the same thing. He was like, "Oh, you're Irish, so have you been to gyms in London? They're way stronger." So I would say, from my observation and experience, the best gyms and the strongest people are actually in England, from in the European kind of gym scene. And we've kind of observed that, said that before. Remember, we were saying the bodybuilding in England is insane compared to Ireland, like it's 10 levels above.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I don't know whether it was just where your one was located, the type of people that were going in there, but like I didn't see like anyone in good shape, and I didn't really like that particular one. I just didn't like the layout of the gym. I wasn't a big fan of it at all. Now, having said that, Johnny reckons that the one in Alexanderplatz was way better, like the same gym but just a different location.
Yeah, the one in Alexanderplatz is class. I went to four different ones.
And was your one? Where was your one in that in the four?
Mm, they were all pretty similar to me. The one Alexanderplatz was the best equipment wise, but the type of people who trained at them all was pretty similar.
yeah, there wasn't many people in great shape at them. But like again, that's a product, I guess, of just like Berlin. Maybe people aren't. They're like, we don't have to worry too much about the way we look, and because
Hmm.
we're
Hmm.
just we're just living.
Yeah,
But yeah, it was interesting. There wasn't too many people in. There was a few. I must to be fair, there was a few girls actually that were in good shape. I'd say
that's what
more
I
so than
that's what I've
more so
noticed.
than the men.
Yeah, that's the same here in Paris. It's like the girls seem to train more and there seems to be a bit better educated on what to do. Now we could be on a bias because like it was 90 to 90% men, 10% girls in all the gyms I've been to so far, Germany or France. And 10% that actually use weights seem to know what they're at. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Okay. Yeah.
Whether like lads will be more likely to just go into the weight room because it's all lads and just wing it and do whatever. Girls to need to be a bit more
Yeah.
certain of themselves and what they're doing to go into the gym or go into the weight section, and we're probably getting a little bit of a bias that way.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense.
That's just my observation. So we'll wrap up with that. I hope people found this episode interesting. Hope you learned something, Brennan. I could stay talking about Berlin for literally days. Like any of those things, Berlin Wall, Brandenburg Gate, Checkpoint Charlie, the Reichstag. I could talk about all of those for an hour or two each. They're just so interesting. And I've got long tours on all those stuff. But I would urge anyone who's interested in traveling, who has like a passion for like just finding things out and discovering why things work that way or why do people do things differently here rather than there. Berlin is a good place for people like that who are naturally curious, who are naturally open-minded, and they want to like just see, geez, what's it like over there? I heard they do things very, very differently. If you go there, you will experience that. You will see people do things very, very differently.
Amen. Yes, you will.
Yeah. And just to finish up, like the first person who gave me the idea to do that vagabonding in Berlin was Tim Ferriss. He said of all the places he's done vagabonding, his favorite two were Berlin and Buenos Aires.
Okay. Wow. He said about Berlin. I didn't know that.
Mm. Berlin and Buenos Aires. It's in the start of the 4 Hour Work Week, one of my favorite books that I've taken a huge amount of life advice from and lessons from business wise and just was mindset wise that I'd urge anyone to read. But his two favorite places were Berlin and Buenos Aires.
Interesting.
So, as usual,
So what the next question? Well, the last question is when are you going to Buenos Aires?
uh, nothing concrete planned yet, but hopefully it's on the list.
Yeah, same. It's one that's on the list too. Definitely.
All right. Thanks for being my sparring partner in this conversation. And I'll talk to
No
you.
problem. It's my
I'll
pleasure.
talk to you very soon, Brennan. I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope I got my Berlin experiences across.
No, I think you did. I think you did a great job, and hopefully you've inspired some people to go and check Berlin out. And if it's not even Berlin, it's somewhere else in this vast world.
Thanks, Brent. See you later.
Yeah. See you later, man.
Take care. Bye.
Bye bye.